My guest today is Peter Balbus, Managing Director of Pragmaxis LLC. Peter specializes in assisting clients with their strategic innovation and performance improvement initiatives, with a focus on strategic supply chain management. In this segment, Peter and I will discuss some of the key learnings that he has gained through his consulting work about what truly drives supply chain excellence. Welcome, Peter. Can you please provide a brief background of yourself?
Well, thank you, Dustin. It's great to be chatting with you once again. I would describe myself as a consultant who specializes in strategic innovation management with an emphasis on strategic sourcing and supply chain transformation. I help clients accelerate their achievement of world-class operational performance and customer fulfillment capabilities. My educational foundation includes an undergraduate degree from MIT in chemical engineering and completion of the University of Chicago Executive Program in Finance and Strategy. I also hold professional certification as a Master Business Innovator through a great offering by Illinois Institute of Technology. My clients are varied in terms of their size and industries. Most are mid to large-scale firms with complex global operations and are spread across multiple industrial segments, including manufacturing, chemicals, energy, and electronics. I've also done some significant work for clients in the food and beverage and office product segments, as well as working with the portfolio companies of a couple of leading private equity firms. Prior to founding Pragmaxis in 2001, I held senior management leadership positions with KPMG, CSC Index, and Booz Allen and Hamilton.
Thank you. Well, my first question is, how would you define and summarize the business metrics of supply chain excellence?
Well, Dustin, I would argue that supply chain excellence isn't really so much about defining and implementing a set of metrics taken at fixed intervals. It's really more about achieving and sustaining a level of balance. We're looking at efficiency and discipline leading to outstanding customer satisfaction that in turn leads to growth in revenues and profitability, really measured over months and years and not just quarters. Too many companies view their supply chain merely as a cost center expense to be minimized. This can often result in very short-sighted behaviors throughout the organization, and that winds up costing much more in lost opportunities, express handling charges, and reduced customer satisfaction. While efficiency and effective use of cash is a critical aspect of supply chain excellence, top companies view their supply chains as perhaps the most critical asset they have to assert market leadership and sustain optimal levels of customer satisfaction.
Are some industries doing better than others in achieving supply chain excellence?
Yes. In most companies, senior management believes they've made great strides in reducing costs, improving inventory turnovers, managing complexity, and enhancing customer satisfaction. The reality is that data from their own financial statements tend to say otherwise, and the results do vary by industry. While virtually all industries have made significant progress in improving performance through the use of technology, especially as measured by revenue per employee, substantial progress on cost efficiencies and inventory management is really only seen in high-tech and electronics industrial segments. For everyone else, progress has largely stalled. The worst results today are found in pharmaceuticals and industrial manufacturing groups. In general, low-margin businesses and industries facing major inflections during market downturns tend to move the fastest in maturing supply chain processes and achieving supply chain excellence before industries with higher margin and less sensitivity to external macroeconomics.
I think these are interesting observations, Peter. You say that reducing supply chain costs is not the best pathway to achieving supply chain excellence. Yet supply chain managers would argue that they can't cut costs, enhance operational capabilities, and increase customer satisfaction all at the same time. How would you emphasize, or how much emphasis do you see on your cost reduction in your work?
Well, that's a great question, Dustin. And the answer may surprise you. My experience is that cost reduction is still by far the most important goal for most companies. And this was confirmed by a recent study published by Aberdeen Group. According to their surveys of 127 corporations, the number one business pressure senior management indicated they were experiencing was reducing supply chain operating costs. Fully 54% of respondents named that supply chain cost reduction as their number one goal. This was even greater than improving top-line revenue, which came in at number 2. Managing increasing demand volatility was number 3. Meeting customer mandates for faster and more accurate fulfillment was 4th. And the need for tighter integration between planning and execution was last. Interesting insights, huh?
Yeah, yes, and I think, I want to know, are there any specific ways that supply chain and general managers can look at their levels of performance and then gauge how well they're doing? Is there a stages of growth analysis that can help individual companies determine where they stand and what they should be concentrating on to become excellent?
Great question. The simple answer is yes, there is. Now, the complexity comes from recognizing that achieving sustained supply chain excellence comes from mastering successive processes within the total supply chain operation. And this typically can only be achieved with a disciplined, step-by-step improvement strategy. In my work, I would define the first stage as the efficient supply chain. For many companies, supply chain excellence is simply defined as achieving the lowest possible manufactured cost. Through the evolution of supply chain processes, costs are reduced, inventory levels are lowered, and waste is eliminated. But all of these companies eventually reach a point where they can no longer cut costs further without adversely impacting customer service levels. We would say that they had reached their efficiency frontier. The second stage is the evolution of the reliable supply chain. Lack of reliability to deliver customer service is the efficient supply chain's Achilles heel. This realization gives way to the concept of a reliable supply chain. With this shift, the focus changes to how companies can balance costs and also achieve reliability in customer service and working capital management. The goal of this supply chain is to get the right product to the right place at the right time and at the right cost. At this level of maturity, companies are typically focusing on improving the decision support systems to increase the potential of the supply chain. The thing is that for many companies, this becomes a detour. There's a prevailing belief that the best supply chain is a tightly integrated supply chain. As companies work on the implementation of processes to become more reliable, they generally find that tight integration is not always beneficial. Indeed, they find that the supply chain needs synchronization of processes through the building of strong horizontal controls. These horizontal controls are generally defined as revenue management, sales and operations planning, or S&OP, supplier development, and corporate social responsibility. During this stage, planning grows in importance, and there is a need to focus on more what-if analysis and simulations to test for reliability. Each planner needs their own workbench to test the feasibility of solutions. And these solutions require a different technology configuration, and this overall tends to run counter to tight integration. The third stage is building the resilient supply chain. During the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009, companies quickly learned that they had to build supply chains that could withstand the gale force winds of both demand volatility and supply disruptions. Companies at this stage of supply chain evolution, companies are more likely to develop greater outside sensing capabilities and change the supply chain's response based on external market conditions. Supply chain leaders that built resilient supply chains and decreased the latency of sensing the demand and supply changes were best able to adapt to rapid market changes. The fourth stage is what we call the adaptive or demand-driven supply chain. In the demand-driven supply chain, companies increase their sensing capabilities and extend their internal sourcing make, and delivery processes into the discussions they have with both buy and sell side trading partners. In these top-to-top meetings and relationships, the discussions become much more data-driven. So as a result, the metrics change. Procurement discussions focus on total landed costs, not just purchase costs. In addition, suppliers are incented to contribute through innovation networks and alignment to corporate social responsibility programs. Scorecards and performance management processes evolve. The emphasis shifts to focus on building win-win partnerships through these supplier development programs. To build supply chain sensing capabilities in the downstream channel, many core processes need to be turned outside in. Demand planning processes change from focusing on predicting what to ship from factories to predicting what will be sold in the channel itself. For many companies, this makes the investments they made in integrated supply chains and multi-year enterprise resource planning programs virtually obsolete. It's no longer sufficient to just be tightly integrated to order and ship processes. Instead, the company needs to define the process of demand translation, that is, the translation of market demand to supply operations with minimal latency. These processes are built on real, live channel data, not corporate history. In the demand-driven supply chain, the processes first sense and then shape demand based on revenue management practices. Demand shaping includes the active processes of new product launch, price management, trade promotion management, marketing and advertising, even incenting sales against revenue management processes. These processes are designed outside in to evaluate what really matters to customers. Companies that mature in this capability are usually also mature in the processes of determining customer profitability through cost to serve analysis and looking at profitability to decide upon the right product portfolio. They actively manage complexity. Now, this stage of development requires tight integration of the R&D efforts to the supply chain processes. Since typically 60 to 80% of the cost of the product are contained in new product launch, and many supply chain networks are defined at the time of launch, companies need to carefully define the coupling of cross-functional horizontal processes. This includes the integration of S&OP planning with R&D stage gate planning, as well as the coupling of corporate social responsibility and supplier development programs. In this stage of supply chain development, one of the toughest change management issues is the elevated role that sales takes on in driving a profitable demand response. Since most organizations are incented on volume and not profitability, there's generally strong resistance to shape demand unless the incentives are aligned to focus on selling a profitable unit. But this is a change management issue worth fighting for. As the demand-driven supply chain evolves, we find that one of the largest impacts is improved customer service and the reduction of cost of sales as a percent of revenue. Customer satisfaction improves, and the dialogue is now focused more on what the customer values, rather than internal self-serving metrics.
Wow, that's a lot of information to digest.
Well, yes, I admit that supply chain excellence and achieving world-class levels of performance are not for the faint of heart. These are very complex concepts that demand exceptional talent, planning, and execution capabilities. Unfortunately, there really are no shortcuts or silver bullets to achieving world-class supply chain excellence. It takes careful planning, full-time, not part-time, resources, and excellent project management skills to move through these stages of growth. Like most complex business initiatives, bringing in some outside resources who've been through these processes before to help can drive these complex initiatives and drive a long way to reducing the risk and costs of working through these stages of growth. But even more important is the understanding that supply chain excellence is not a final destination. It is an ongoing, relentless process of improvement over time and as technologies evolve. Even the goals and definition of supply chain excellence evolve and mature over time. It's been said before, but the only constant in business today is really one thing, and that's change.
Thank you, Peter.